Hello people, Scotty. Like I had already said before, and I'll show you again, it really is a waste of time arguing with this person. He's like a brick wall that just does not like facts. He hates facts, he doesn't like reason, and he's illogical. He's the perfect example of a person that lives up to the definition of irrational. You know, it's pointless debating someone like that. You may as well beat your head against a brick wall. I made it abundantly clear that collectivism is another word for socialism. I did. Even Edward G. Griffin says this here.
Those bankers are not capitalists. Most of those bankers, I guess the best word you would say for them is they're collectivists, which is another word of saying socialists.
Oh, but we'll just ignore the fact that, collectivist is just another word for a socialist, that's not important. We'll just ignore the fact that the synonym for collectivism, shown in various sources, such as here, 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 and here, despite all that evidence that, of course, socialism is synonymous to the word collectivism, we'll just completely brush that under the carpet. And we all know the reason why he does this. He does this because the fact that that's exactly what Nazi Germany was. Now, he's just irrational. There's no point even, making a video response to him, right? This video is not as a response to himself, but it's more or less to show, what's the point? What exactly is the point wasting the time? I can show you myself what Nazi Germany was. The reason why I pointed out about the American history, such as, of course, to do with the turnpike industry, Alexander Hamilton, the relation to do with all the, American Revolutionary War, the protectionist tariffs, and all the rest of this stuff. The reason why I pointed out that recorded history was simply because it is in relation to Nazi Germany for this reason. Well, the reason why it related was because the fact that, that's what British mercantilism was. British mercantilism was fascism, okay? That's just an old name for fascism. So in other words, when we talk about the capitalist class who led the charge to end the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townsend Act, and of course the tea tariff, all of that led to the American Revolutionary War, the reason why he is desperately trying to brush the importance of that history under the carpet is simply because of the very fact it is showing you who the socialists supported, what the socialists supported. I showed you in the previous video, of course, a quotation that more or less gives this away. Now, of course, he doesn't like this. He absolutely hates this. He can't stand to see it. He can't stand to see the fact that a socialist was the one supporting corporatism, in other words, mercantilism. And how mercantilism was formed was basically through a strong national central government. Through a strong national government. And how do we know this from history? Alexander Hamilton, the founder of cronyism in the United States, knew that he could not achieve his goals of this corporatist America that you see today. He knew he could not achieve it without strong national powers into a national government. It's why he supported a strong national government. It's why he opposed the original Articles of Confederation of 1776 that was, formed officially in 1781, passed forth for ratification. And from, 1787, when he attended the Constitutional Convention, he was one of them who strongly supported changing the Articles of Confederation, which was the original American Constitution. The American Constitution was based off defending capitalism. This is why he doesn't like this. This is the reason why he's trying to desperately brush this part of history onto the carpet. Because it was Alexander Hamilton who was a contributor to the Federalist Papers, which is a collection of 81 papers which was written in 1787. and then passed forth for ratification in 1788, which would become the new constitution. Things didn't exactly go in his favour, however, because the new constitution was even strongly defending states' rights and, of course, capitalism. And they didn't like that. But what gave, Alexander Hamilton the powers more powers than what he should have had, was the fact that in 1789 to 1795, he became the first Secretary of the Treasury of the United States. And because he was strongly favoured by George Washington, he was given more powers than what he should have. In other words, he was given powers over things such as like taxing the people. And he strongly taxed the people, of course, and he strongly supported all the strong protectionist tariffs. He was a strong advocate of a strong national government. He was the founder of cronyism in the United States. So the whole reason why I had pointed out about, of course, in relation to do with American history, with the American Revolution, was to show this is what the capitalist class were strongly against. They were against all of these things such as the protectionist tariffs, the internal improvements, and all the rest of those sort of things. In other words, they were against fascism. But of course, we'll just pretend that's not important. It's not important that, of course, capitalists were strongly opposed to fascism. That's not important, as if that's not in relation to do with Nazi Germany, I've pointed this out several times before and I'll show it again.
A lot of times libertarians and supporters of the free market are called fascists, right? It's a stupid, inane remark to make. How could we possibly be fascists when fascism was developed specifically as an alternative to laissez-faire capitalism? That was expressly the goal of the thing.
And of course, Tom Woods had went on to say this.
We talked about fascism as a third way, allegedly, between capitalism and communism. It rejects both. So anyone saying that a libertarian is a fascist obviously doesn't understand what fascism is, because it was self-consciously designed as being in opposition to capitalism as well as to communism.
Now, of course, we accept the fact that fascism opposed communism. We understand that. But here's an interesting clip by, of course, Edward G. Griffin explaining about this whole thing with fascism, communism, socialism.
Collectivism is the word, ladies and gentlemen. Communism is a variant of collectivism. Fascism is a variant of collectivism. Nazism, a variant. And all of these isms, if you really look at them, they're all the same substance underneath. If you peel off the label and you ignore the design of the uniforms worn by the military of those regimes, and if you ignore the design of the nationalistic flags that are flown over the capitals of those regimes, and you get down to the hardcore of what they believe, you'll find that they believe exactly the same.
What he had also pointed out was another important point, and that was the very fact that, of course, fascism and communism do oppose one another. However, the important point being is that being a classical liberal that I am, and this, social democrat 01, trying to connect fascism to some sort of libertarian movement, as if to say that free market capitalism is basically something to do with Nazi Germany, as if to blame capitalism on Nazi Germany, despite the fact that they're so diametrically opposed. Here's what Tom Woods basically says.
So this is the embodiment of the principles of fascism that we've seen. The charismatic leader, the nation trumps the individual, the so-called public interest trumps the private interest, the opposition to both capitalism and communism, the opposition to classical liberal restraints on the powers of government, all these features, and of course political centralization. Well, Hitler couldn't have been clearer about that he's not going to have any states' rights or nullification in certainly not secession or anything like that in Germany. You can forget about that. There's going to be one power center, and it's going to rule over everybody.
So you see, Social Democrat 01 is religious of socialism. And it wouldn't matter how many times you point out the very fact that what collectivism essentially is synonymous to socialism, meaning it's exactly or nearly the same by definition. And you can look at both definitions. I've pointed it out so many times. I don't even need to go into it, but socialism and collectivism are the same by definition. When you talk about socializing something, that's what you're doing, you're collectivizing it. So I'm not going to go into that again, but he has religiously tried to brush this under the carpet, okay? He's tried to religiously ignore this. And the reason why he tried to make it out in his recent video response that, oh well, all this stuff to do with Alexander Hamilton and collectivization and socialization and, all this stuff to do with socialism being related to collectivism, the reason why he is desperately trying to brush that under the carpet to try and get you to look away from it is the very fact that what collectivism essentially is another word for socialism. That is the reason why he cannot stand that, and he's desperately trying to pull the argument away from that. And the reason why he's desperately trying to pull the argument away from that is because collectivism basically is socialism. So ask yourself this, ladies and gentlemen. What exactly is he trying to say? That Nazi Germany was not a collectivist movement? Well, of course, here's Tom Wood's words here.
Individual rights are subordinate to the good of the nation, and the public interest trumps the private interest.
Seriously, people, is he trying to claim that Nazi Germany that essentially put the public interests over the individual's interests, a movement that basically subordinated the individual's rights, all for the sake of the collective, and we've got evidence of that. He made it clear in his own words. Adolf Hitler couldn't have made it clearer. He said in 1930 to Otto Strasser, "I am a socialist, and a very different kind of socialist from your rich friend Count Reventlow." He also said, and it is so clear, he said, "Society's needs come before the individual's needs." Does that sound like an individualist? And if that wasn't enough, he says, "We must find and travel the road from individualism to socialism without revolution." Those were Adolf Hitler's own words.
And then finally we talked about political centralization also as being a central, so to speak, feature of fascism.
So why is the word centralisation so important to look at in relation to what he was talking about there? And because it's something strongly related to fascism, as fascism's all about this strong central power. Why centralisation an important word to look at? Because, ladies and gentlemen, because when you speak about the word socialise or centralise or collectivise, it all means the same thing. I mean, let's put it this way. What does it mean by centralisation? Centralisation simply means that you're basically bringing something together into a group. That's essentially what centralisation means. When you're centralising something, you've probably heard the term, centralised agriculture. What does it mean by centralised agriculture? Well, what difference is that to something that's being nationalised? When you're centralising it, you're basically nationalising it. When you centralise it, you're basically collectivising it. So, in other words, when you hear about collectivised agriculture, that is centralised agriculture. It's the same thing. That's what centralisation is. Centralisation is collectivisation. It's the same thing. It's just like if you have socialised medicine, socialised healthcare, that is universal, that is collectivised. And the reason why he tries to religiously and desperately try and pull you away from that is because that's what socialism is. Tom Woods just said it in his own words. He just told you that fascism was strongly all about, the centralisation. That's essentially what fascism was all about. We've even got his words here.
Okay, getting back to Hitler here. Hitler, as again, we'll talk all about this in Western Civ 2, but he did not hesitate to execute rivals, to execute enemies of his. He did this in the so-called Night of the Long Knives in 1934, very dramatically. But here I want to point out that Hitler, in a sense, was always a socialist. And it was his view. Again, you see this is compatible with this is quite compatible with fascism. He says every individual and group should work for what's best for the state. So it's Hitler's view that it doesn't matter who owns a factory as long as the factory owner does as he's told. As long as the owners do what they're told, it doesn't matter if they own it or not. So here's Hitler. He says, our socialism reaches much deeper. It does not change the external order of things. It orders solely the relationship of man to the state. Then what does property and income count for? Why should we need to socialize the banks and the factories? We are socializing the people. So if we get people voluntarily to want to do the right thing for the government, let them keep their crummy property, as long as we get them to do with it what we want. You get a sense here of Hitler's views on who's really in charge of the economy. He says that the job of the Ministry of Economics is to present the tasks of the national economy, and then the private economy will have to fulfill them. So we're in charge, we tell you what the goals are, and you will have to do what we say. And if the private economy fails to do so, and then these are Hitler's words again, then the National Socialist state will know how to solve these tasks. If that doesn't send a shudder up your spine, I guess you don't understand what he means by we'll know what to do if you don't do what we're ordering you to do.
Lewis, Ethan, see, the only reason why I get into, responding back to this complete and utter fool is because of the fact that I seen that yous were responding and constantly posting things to my Facebook and things like that. See, to be honest with you, Ethan and Lewis and Brandon, etc., that's had to put up with this moron, I wouldn't bother. I really would not bother. This video is more or less to show how irrational he is. And I'm going to leave you here with this clip where Tom Woods basically says that if this doesn't get through to you, then you're lost, you're long gone, and that basically describes what social democrat is here.
I want to talk to you now about a book called The Vampire Economy, subtitled Doing Business Under Fascism. I've had you read a chapter from that book for this week, and I hope you found it interesting. It gives an indication of what economic life really was like. And if you can read this book and still think that Germany had a free market economy where business and individuals were free to buy and sell and interact with people as they wished, then there's no reaching you, because obviously this was nothing remotely like a market economy. Industrialists, for example, would be visited by state auditors who would have orders to examine their balance sheets. They'd be able to examine all their bookkeeping entries. And if the government found even the tiniest little mistake, they would impose tremendous financial penalties on that business.
So let me start by saying that there is no such thing as crony capitalism. There's no such thing as something capitalism. There's capitalism. And capitalism is about free markets. It's about the separation of state, of government, from economics, from any involvement in business and in the marketplace. And therefore there's no something capitalism, there's capitalism. So yeah, there's cronyism, crony socialism maybe, or let's just call it cronyism. Let's just call it, this is government involvement in the economy. This is the inevitable consequence of the mixed economy. So let's talk about that. This is inevitable. You can't exist in this kind of economy, in this kind of world, without there being cronyism. The reason is that that's how we've set up our economic. That's the essence of a mixed economy.
And that's the reason why it's a complete and utter waste of time arguing with him. He basically tried to make it out as if I changed the subject. It wasn't changing the subject at all. It was pointing out the fact that capitalists in America were strongly opposed to fascism. That's what it was doing. And the reason why he doesn't like the fact that that's related to Nazi Germany is because Nazi Germany was fascist. That was as far away from capitalism as you could get. It's anti-capitalist. How's it capitalist to say, well, we want the people to basically do everything, the state wants? How's it capitalist to say, well, we're going to put the, collective group's interests over that of the individual, where we're going to subordinate your individual rights, and we're going to centralise the entire economy, which is basically another word for socialising the entire economy. But, this is laughable. I mean, here we have Kitty Werthmann. Kitty Werthmann was a survivor in Nazi Germany, and as she said in her own words, even she's more educated. And I'm not surprised she's more educated. She actually lived a horrifying experience. Okay? She lived that and she escaped that. And as she said in her own words, she said here,
there were two political factions fighting each other. Communist Party was getting very powerful. So was the Nazi Party. Now when I speak of the Nazi Party, the Nazi Party, what we are going to be in our country, the National Socialist Party. I translate National Socialism. That's where the word Nazi came from. We also had regionalism. Regionalism is to centralize the government. Centralization is socialism.
She also made it very clear on things such as newspaper and radio being centralised.
The newspaper were being censored before it hit the street. Hitler also gave us free radios, and then he nationalized our radio station. And we were told that if you listen to a foreign radio station, there's capital punishment.
And she made this very clear also on things such as the healthcare.
Everything was being nationalized. He also nationalized our healthcare system. We had, before Hitler, an excellent healthcare system. Privately insured, we had good doctors, we had good hospitals, we had a lot of good research. That all stopped.
You see, it doesn't matter how much evidence is out there, and it doesn't matter how many facts you put out there. It's basically a religion to find whatever the way they can to try and swerve past the reality, to swerve past the facts of recorded history, to swerve past the fact that, of course, collectivism is another word for socialism. That's just it. That's what it all comes down to. And the reason why they have to religiously pull themselves away from that recorded history and pretend that's off topic, such as what he's doing, is simply because the fact that is contradicting him. It's contradicting him that the American Revolutionary War was, the whole purpose of it was fighting against his fascism, which was British mercantilism. That's what fascism was. It's just an old name for fascism. That's what British mercantilism was. That's what, the American Revolutionary War was all about. That's why he wants to pull you away from it. That's why he wants to say, look, it's off topic. How is it off topic? They were fighting against fascism. This is just laughable. And it's just... Yeah, there's no point arguing with them.